Some of you may have noticed I have not been active on here very much lately. Without turning this into a big rant about my opinions of social media and what it's doing to this country and its impact on how we interact, not to mention polarization, homogenization of the culture, and how it trickles into things like trying to own a home where you live, etc., etc. Not turning it into a rant about that. But it largely deters me from participating. But then I go and I do trainings or I go see people at events, and it re-inspires me to, I guess, add things. So I'm going to start a new thing. I'm going to call it Here's What I'm Doing and Why. And instead of making action videos like I used to back in the day, which is kind of worn thin, there's only so many of those you can do before it feels repetitious. I'm going to start posting clips from actual jobs and discussing what am I doing and why am I doing it. Because a lot of times there's a lot more going on than just your average textbook forces and redirecting and workload limit and minimum breaking strength. There's a lot of factors involved around jobs that just don't get covered when you start talking about what we're supposed to be doing and how we're supposed to be doing it, etc., etc. So, okay, Monterey Cypress leaning over the roof. All limbs have been rigged off to the roof and process on top thrown over. Now, what am I doing? Well, we've created a floating rigging system to deal with the wood. Why are we doing that? Because to rig the wood in a traditional negative rigging setup would put it kind of directly over the roof, and once you got to a certain point, you'd run the risk of actually striking the roof. Not ideal. We don't want to rig the wood to the roof. We want to get it to the ground so we don't have to cut it up into little bits. I believe we were allowed to leave the wood, so we want big pieces that we can roll to the corner of the yard. The yard also has very steep terrain. We also can't get large equipment there. So the floating redirect between the eucalyptus you'll see when it pans around again and the other tree, I believe was a deodar, provided the perfect sort of swing point to get these logs away from the house and then also up the hill, the embankment that this tree is on, which you can't really tell, but get it to where we want to be. So what am I doing with the butt line here? Well, we only have one lowering device, and the lowering device is on the uke tree for the floating rigging line. I could take just a regular rigging point and have somebody take a wrap around the trunk or something like that, but we decided to just double block with aerial friction and let it run itself, drift it into the floating rigging point because I don't want to just dump weight into there. I want to do everything I can to slowly introduce the force of that weight. I want to keep it as static as I possibly can, which is I can't keep it totally static because it does have to move dynamically, but I want to dissipate that force by slowing it down with this drift line. It's a big concern with a floating rigging point because you not only have the deflection forces on either anchor point, you're also doubling that deflection point by going through that rigging point in the middle. So you're pulling each rigging point laterally pretty strongly in the middle with the force of the weight, and then you're doubling it because you have to counterbalance it by managing the weight on the ground at your lowering device. So this is what we did to deal with that situation.